Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Yorkshire Gamers, a big Wargames podcast. And here we are at episode 61. And today I'm going to be talking to Greg and Miles from Little Wars TV. Little Wars TV has been off air for a short while, and we delve into why they're coming back and what we've got to look forward to from their channel and what's behind the door if you've watched that video. A bit of housekeeping as always before we start the interview. And bits of sad news have come through over recent days. Unfortunately, Robbie Baker, who was the I first met him as the designer of the original First Corps ACW models, but he'd been around for a while. Prior to that, he'd done work with Games Workshop. He'd done work. I found out this morning with Dixon miniatures. He'd also done quite a lot of work in more recent years with Gripping Beast, and sadly he passed away a couple of days ago. I believe it wasn't expected, and I saw him wandering around the show at Partisan, and I was speaking to Mark Hyde's previous guest on the show, and we were plotting getting Robbie on the show. So obviously that's not going to happen now, which is really sad. But what a fantastic legacy of brilliant figures he leaves behind. So rest in peace, Robbie. And also, Derek from Derek's Toys up in Scotland passed away recently as well, and we we'd had a few arguments on the over the internets over the years, and it does make me smile thinking that he would have moaned about this episode as well, because he didn't like it when I interviewed other hosts of other shows, and we had a good laugh and a joke about it, and we met up at Steel Lard a couple of times, and he was pulling my leg, and he was such a nice guy. So yeah, real shame. And I know he was heavily involved with the Claymore show, and he passed away just before the show took place last weekend. So rest in peace, mate. You will be missed. For those of you who have been interested, the World Cup of Wargames miniature manufacturers is at the semi-final stage now. We have got down to the last four, and Pendraken will be taking on Victrix in the first semi-final, which will start today, Wednesday, if you are listening to this on audio, and then the second semi-final between Perry Miniatures and Empress Miniatures will start on Thursday. Both will run for 3 days as the previous ones, and then I'll hopefully get the final off next Thursday as well. Nearly 20,000 votes so far, and that's 6,000 more than we had on the Rules World Cup in total, and we've still got three more ties left. So thank you very much for everyone who has got involved with that particular competition. So, on to today's guests, and I'm sure you know these guys. Little Wars TV has got a huge number of followers on the YouTube, even more than Alex Sutherland, would you believe? And they are back on air and back doing what they do best, which is promoting our hobby in an absolutely fantastic and interesting way over there in America. And Greg and Miles from the Little Wars came on. Lots of people are involved in it, but Greg and Miles are the two chaps who put their feet forward and volunteered to come on the show. So it's slightly a bit different to normal. You could probably tell the sections are there, but I haven't split it in half. In four pieces as I would normally do. Greg had a little bit of time constraints with some family things that he needed to sort out, so I condensed it down. I did say 90 minutes, and then we ended up doing 2 hours. So it's not that short, but it's short for me, if you know what I mean. So sit back with a slightly smaller cup of tea than you normally do, and less biscuits. And without further ado, here's the interview. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of the Yorkshire Gamer Big Wargames podcast. And it's time once again to go up and away to the USA. And it's been a while since we've been overseas, and the Yorkshire Gamer Pigeon's got a bit overweight and he's developed a drink problem as well. But that's nothing that a good dose of tea and a kick up the arse won't get moving. So let's get all airborne over to the States, and today's guests are part of the Little Wars TV group, something which has changed the face of historical wargaming YouTubes with its professional approach and in-depth features. Well known for their in-depth rule reviews, refights of great battles and campaigns, and let's face it, some pretty dodgy headgear. They meet in a fantastic club room, which often features on the show. It's sort of the place that every wargamer dreams of, being a member. If it wasn't for the journey back every Saturday to watch Bradford City and frankly the disturbing quality of tea in that country, I'd be a member myself. So sit back and enjoy the next hour or so with my guests, two people I'm sure you're all familiar with. Greg and Miles from Little Wars TV. Hello, guys.
Hello, Ken. Great
Good
to
to
be
be with
here.
you, Ken.
Excellent. Nice to see you, chaps. Now, this is a bit of an off the wall question, but we've been over to America with the Big War Games podcast on a number of occasions, and only to find that the Americans that we were talking to were actually expat Brits. So, are you guys genuine Americans?
Greg, you go first.
As far as I know, I believe so. I mean, if you can't tell from my accent.
I was born in Bayou La Batre, Alabama. So
Oh, excellent.
maybe not part of America, but definitely not part of Britain.
Well, it makes because normally, oh yeah, I was born in Basingstoke near London. Oh no, another one where we've failed to get an actual American on the show. But there we go.
I'm
That's great. We've
afraid
got
you've got two.
two genuine Americans. I'm really looking forward to this one. So, guys, we've got about 90 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. So I'm going to cut a few things short here and there. But the one thing that we do want to do, because it's the introduction for everyone, and that is the 4 minute challenge. And that's going to be a summary of your wargaming life in 4 minutes or less. We'll go alphabetically. We'll go Greg first. I haven't got anything more technical than me waving my phone at you as it counts down. So, are you ready to go, mate?
I am ready to go.
Let's do it. We're
I
off.
think 4 minutes should be plenty of time. Um, thanks for sending this question ahead of time because I was trying to think who I wanted to credit with the start of my wargaming journey. Because anytime I'm asking somebody about how they started wargaming, I'm always most interested in what the entry point was. And it's very often something like Dungeons and Dragons or Games Workshop. Mine was historical, and I'll credit my dad, who is not a war gamer at all. He still doesn't play war games, but he is an absolute history enthusiast, an amazing storyteller. So I grew up from a really young age hearing about history. His favorite two stories to tell were the Battle of the Alamo and Custer's Last Stand. He inserted himself, of course, into both stories, and I was so young at the time that I didn't understand that he wasn't present for both of those battles. But he was just a real inspiration for me to get interested in military history. So from a very young age, I was into it, and we did a lot of board games at home. Traditional kind of board games, not military games. It was not until middle school when I met a guy you've seen, if you're familiar with Little Wars TV on the channel. His name is Zach. Zach and I went to middle school together, and Zach is the first person who introduced me to miniatures. I had no conception that miniature wargaming existed until he introduced me. And of course, it was to Warhammer, as one would expect. Um, I had always been looking for something a little bit more historical. Did not know it existed. I was 13 years old at the time. And I went into the local comic book shop. Of course, I was playing Warhammer because that's what my friends played. Not that I particularly enjoyed it, but yeah, that's what everybody did. And in the front case of the comic book shop were painted World War II Germans and Americans, 28 millimeter. I was just like, oh my gosh, who owns these? Where do I get these miniatures? And I found out from the store owner that there were a group of guys in the back of the comic book store playing World War II minis. Chow and Keith, who you've seen on the channel as well. And so my mom drove me out to the comic book shop on Wednesday night when they were meeting in the back. They were in their 30s. I was 14, so that had to be weird for them. But instead of ignoring me, which they absolutely could have done, they were extremely friendly, totally welcoming to see me there. I don't know how I would have felt if I was in their shoes and a 14-year-old came to pop in on my game. But the fact that they welcomed me is really the reason why I'm here now. And I think there's some valuable lessons there to be learned for all of us. I mean, it's something that I keep in mind now that I'm a gamer. We just got back from Historicon, Miles and I here in the US, saw a lot of younger gamers. Mm-hmm. And you never know, just offering a younger gamer 30 seconds of your time, a minute of your time, giving them a little bit of encouragement to get into the hobby, to try it out. You never know what kind of impact that's going to make. It made a huge impact for me when I was young. And I think that, if we're going to grow the hobby, that's how we're going to do it, by welcoming other gamers into the space. So if you've seen Little Wars TV, then you know a lot about kind of where I'm at right now. But that's how I got started in historical wargaming. 10 seconds to spare, Ken.
Well done. Congratulations. Superb timing. Miles was having a little giggle there when I held the phone up.
Well, it's just the professional quality of your tools you're using. I'm impressed.
It's quality for Yorkshire.
Good point. Well, my story is not nearly as interesting as Greg. I got started in gaming back in the 70s when I was in high school, so I'm a little older than Greg, through strategy and text, hex encounter war games, which in Bayou La Battery, Alabama, which is about as far south as you can go in Alabama before you walk into the Gulf of Mexico. There weren't a lot of war gamers. So I played a lot of solitaire games, gave it up, went through life, eventually had a son. He turned 12 and wanted to do Warhammer because some of his friends were doing Warhammer, and I started doing Warhammer. And in about 6 months, he wanted to build robots, which is much cooler. I still wanted to do Warhammer, but it was kind of creepy having the old guy hang around the Warhammer store. So I found historicals. I then had a bit of a health scare. I had a pair of strokes, which I don't recommend. And I started miniature painting as a form of fine motor control therapy, which is my excuse for being such a horrible painter. I trot that out so people feel bad when they make fun of my miniatures. But I've been going ever since. And then I was very fortunate that Greg and the guys at the club had a huge lapse in judgment and allowed me to join. And just been having a blast. It's a great hobby, and it's one that I feel very fortunate to be able to participate in.
Excellent. 2 minutes 31 left. Woo!
Damn.
I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of that clock of doom. I'm not getting anywhere near it.
I used to have there's a show in the UK called Countdown, which is it's a really cheesy quiz. But they have a 30-second countdown clock at the end, but it just doesn't work anymore. I'm not very technically minded, so I can't insert it. I had to hold my phone up against the microphone, and this new super noise cancelling microphone is cancelling the noise that I want it to play.
I miss D.I. Reagan.
Yeah, exactly. The Sweeney. Have you guys ever seen the Sweeney over in America?
I've seen it once, and it's pretty hard.
I've Greg, even if it's just for 10 minutes on the YouTube, the Sweeney, it's like a 1970s cop movie, TV series. A lot of violence, a lot of swearing. It's
Greg. I can honestly tell you, it's one of the few things you can see on TV that will make you feel culturally superior as an American to the British. Usually, it's the other way around.
Always the other way around.
I based my entire career on that show. It's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, what can I say? What can I say? So we always start off with a bit of a chat about personal wargaming, and then we'll move on to Little Wars and the club a little bit later on. So if if I said to you, Greg, you're coming round to my house, we've got a 12-by-6 table, you're gonna put a game on. What would your go-to favourite be?
Mm. Let's see. I'm a big battle guy. I think anybody who's seen me on YouTube
Hey,
knows. Yeah, so I'm on the correct podcast. I'm in
good
the
lad,
right
good
place.
lad.
Uh, I did grow up in the hobby skirmish gaming, but as soon as I kind of discovered big battles existed, I never really looked back. So we would absolutely be playing a big battle game. I'm a fan of a huge number of periods. If I had to pick one, my favorite is probably the American Civil War. So we'd probably play a big American Civil War battle, uh, a whole battle, not a little piece of a battle. That's for
Hmm.
suckers. So we would be playing probably something like Volley and Bayonet or Altar of Freedom, something that would really allow us to get, all of Gettysburg or all of Antietam in like 3-4 hours.
Hmm.
That'd be my ideal game.
Superb. How does the American Civil War sit in, and Miles as well would join in? How does the American Civil War sit with society now in America? Obviously, there's been lots of changes over recent years. Is it taboo? Is it something that people still talk about? How does it work over there?
Are you asking for war gamers or more public consciousness?
I think wargamers, well, kind of crossover. If somebody saw you ACW game who maybe didn't know anything about wargaming, how would they react to that today as opposed to 15 years ago, say?
So I'll be interested to hear Miles's perspective on this. I have conflicting answers for you. On the one
Yeah.
hand, I would tell you that the American Civil War is probably the one period of military history that the average American knows something about.
Mm,
So
yeah.
if you were playing that game in a public space and random strangers walked by, they would know what you were doing. There is an
Mm,
awareness of that conflict. It's still very much in the public zeitgeist. But the other side of that coin is that it used to be a lot more popular. And that I think we can attribute 100% to the Killer Angels, the novel, and the prequel and the sequel that his son wrote, and to the movie Gettysburg, and to Ken Burns's Civil War series on
superb.
PBS. So
Superb.
if you're going back 15, 20 years, there was like a whole wave of media here in the US that really raised public awareness of the American Civil War, and interest was very high for like a 10-year period. That's tapered off. And there hasn't been a whole lot of media,
Yeah.
like Hollywood
Mm,
media, around the American Civil War. So,
Well, it also
yeah.
doesn't lend itself to skirmish as much, and skirmish gaming because it's at the level of preparation to play for skirmish game is so much lower than big battle. So I think that detracts. I think I grew up in the deep south. I was actually put off from miniature gaming when I was in high school because there were a few miniature gamers in Alabama, and they had a particular over affiliation for the
Yeah.
Confederacy to the point where you didn't want to be around them. And I think it's very similar to World War II gaming. If two sides are playing World War II gaming, someone has to be the Germans. Um, if they show up in German Nazi uniforms
Hmm.
and that, that's beyond the pale. If they show up in street clothes and play the Germans, that's fine. Same with the American Civil War. If we could play the Civil War, but if we were to show up in Confederate uniforms,
Hmm.
um, people would look askance at us, and some people would be offended because quite frankly, they were the bad guys in the Civil War. The good guys won in that war. And so I think it's a degree. It's also being aware that people interpret information in lots of different ways, and you have to be responsible for that. You can't
Hmm.
just you can't have fun at other people's expense.
I think it's important to keep history alive.
Yeah,
And I think most wargamers, certainly the ones I've met, are able to distinguish between playing a side and being, I said in the last podcast that we did that if I was pulling chicks in a tank, I'd want a Jagdpanther because it looks really cool. But then I had to kind of go very, very quickly. I'm not doing the whole German thing.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a captured Jagdpanther, and I'm in the British Royal Tank Regiment. So I had to kind of backstep very quickly.
I think you want to play. If there are historical bad guys, the Germans are in World War II. You're not going to play French versus British. You're going to play someone versus a German. Someone's got to play the Germans, and that's perfectly appropriate. As long as you kind of leave it at the game and the political aspect, you don't carry that forward. Or if you do, I don't want to play with you.
So, Miles, what would your choice be?
My choice would be the right choice, which would be a Napoleonic game.
Big Napoleonic man.
I'm a very big Napoleonic man. It would either be 10 or 15 millimeter. I like the smaller scales because it allows more room for maneuver on a table.
Yeah.
And so I would do Salamanca. I would do Talavera, which might be a hint for upcoming in this season, or one of the other big battles. But do it in a way where there's some pre-battle maneuver. So the actual engagement is not an exact recreation of the historical one. Because if you do too much historical, players will play as they read in the history books, not what their mind tells them to do, and you can get a very stale type game.
Yeah. So, rules wise, then, Miles, with that, have you gone through that kind of empire phase?
I am a huge fan of Dave Brown's General d'Armée too. All hail Dave Brown. They're actually great rules. We scale them up. So rather than a battalion, we have it. Each unit is a brigade. It works great. We don't bother changing artillery ranges. It's just a fun game, and they've done command friction in a particularly kind of elegant way that you have to think about it, but it doesn't lose the game for you.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I'm General de Brigade as well, and I'm just about to try General d'Armée at some stage. We'll give that a go. See how that works out. So you've obviously got the space down at the club. Do you have a home space as well, Greg? Do you have like a hobby room or?
I do have a pretty nice sized hobby area here at home, but it's really for painting and crafting. I almost never play a game here at home. And that's because I'm just really spoiled and all of my friends are at the club. And so why wouldn't I go to the club to play? So I could count on one hand the number of times that I've gamed here at home.
Yeah. Miles, how about you?
I'm the exact same way. I do all my painting and crafting in the basement. I've got a big 8x4 table that's really nice that I built. And it is a giant filing cabinet that I pile crap on top of.
So this is a disease then that I believe occurs all over the world, and that is that if a wargamer sees a flat space that has nothing on it,
you gotta put stuff on it.
They will put something on it.
And then you gotta lose it. It's the same flat space, but it moves because it's not where you put it down the first time.
Exactly. True story. I painted some Danish Napoleonic ships for a friend of mine, all rigged, all flagged, absolutely beautiful. Handed them over to them, and from that day he lost them. And this was 28 years ago. And then he's moving house now, and he finally found them, and he brought them round and gave me them back because he said. I'm not responsible enough to have these ships in my possession.
Did he take the dust off them?
Well, they'd been in a box, so they were as I painted them on that day. It was like a time capsule. It was, I don't know if you have those in the States, where in the UK we kind of bury things and then open them like 40 or 50 years later, and wish we hadn't because they're all now no longer appropriate, or the record from the person that's in the time capsules now in prison for doing something inappropriate. It never goes well. It never goes well.
Ken, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, fire away, mate.
and this is born of sort of genuine curiosity about the difference maybe in the gaming cultures here in the US versus where you are in the UK. Miles and I are, I think, based on everyone we've talked to at conventions, we're pretty unusual for American gamers in that we have a club. There are clubs all over the United States, but they are not common. And I assume in part that's just geography, right? I mean, the US is a really big country, so it's hard to get a confluence maybe of gamers together in a drivable, regular meeting spot. So most gamers that I talk to who are Americans, they game in their basement at home with a couple other people. It's just one or two other friends. That is by far seems to be the most common way for historical players to get together. My impression from what I've heard is that in the UK, clubs and groups are far more common, or they seem far more common than they are here. Is that your experience?
I'd say it was more common than it is in the States, the club side of things. But it's it, there are lots and lots of small groups of people, five, six, seven, eight, who meet at somebody's house, who you don't really notice because they don't put games on at shows, or they're just a little group or a little community within themselves that don't necessarily advertise for new members. I would say that all major towns and cities in the UK have got some form of club. Some have even got, I mean, Leeds has got two or three. So I think it's a mix, and I think the club thing will appear more prevalent from a distance because that's what you guys see. Um, Whereas, we haven't done it here since COVID, but there used to be 6 to 8 guys who would come round here and we'd game regularly as well as going to the club. So it's kind of a bit of a mix, really. It works well. It works well. But there's lots of people out there. I didn't realize, because when I started my podcast, I thought nobody was big gaming anymore. I thought there's only me left. It's like I'm the only one. And then all these people like come out from their. It's like coming out of a nuclear shelter at the end of the nuclear winter, and
There's
and
more.
everyone comes out and go, "Oh, I do that as well." And it's been quite refreshing and quite morale boost to find out all these people around the world as well as the UK that still enjoy big games as well as skirmish games.
It's
Which
always
is
heartening to know there are other survivors.
exactly, exactly, exactly. We'll do the Venn diagram of wargaming, which is something that always goes on in the podcast, because it does tell you, I think, when you kind of break it down, where your gaming style is. Because some people just want figures on a table and play a game, whereas others are involved in different areas of it. So, Miles, we'll go with you first. So, the four sections are wargamer, painter, collector, and historian. So, how do you see those bits of the hobby fitting together for you?
I think I'm less a painter. If I can just get them colored and they look good at 3 feet, I'm fine.
Mm.
I like the history. I really enjoy the playing, and then the craft thing I like is I like making terrain. Um, so if I had to kind of sit there, I focus first on playing the games and the interaction, the strategy. I'm not concerned if I've got the right color on the cuffs of my units. That's for other people who are wiser than me to worry about. And I enjoy making terrain, and always, the history I think is always the biggest draw to the hobby.
Is it important for you then that the game that you play reflects the history and the tactics of the period,
Yeah,
or is it
I think
just
it's important
stay in
that
the game?
it's a historical theme, which means unbalanced forces. So you have to
Mm.
be a little creative in how you define victory. I'm not into points based games. Nothing wrong with them. They're just not for me because there's not that history link.
Yeah,
When I first started gaming, it was all tournaments and Flames of War, and all you had was points. So I'm grateful for that. But a little extra effort, you could put Shiloh on, and Shiloh can
mm.
be a finely balanced game if you design the victory requirements, with that nod, which Greg has done with Altar of Freedom. I don't get a plug for saying Altar of Freedom, but I'm going to say it like 7 times because I get it $10 each time.
Is there like a little payment going on here every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
you
like your little clock. I'm just keeping track right now. I'll send him a bill.
is is it like Ultra Freedom tokens that
Yeah,
you can
I get credit
later?
for that one too because he said it.
Yeah, yeah. You can have my token miles, and when you're down the pub or you're down in a bar somewhere, you can just bring out 3 Ultra Freedom tokens. There's
There
another
you
one,
go.
and that gets you a beer. I think that's very reasonable. So, Greg, now I've cost you a load of money.
Miles gets
How do
plenty
you?
of beers off of me. That's fine. That's fine. He's usually a good drinking companion.
Oh, superb, superb. How do you see the Wargamer painter collector historian thing for yourself then?
My Venn diagram would be similar to Miles, but I would put historian first. I'm interested most in the history and in the researching of the scenarios. I would put wargaming, playing the game second. I really do enjoy that part. And then way down the list would be painting and collecting. I do paint. Sometimes I even enjoy it, but most of the time I'm just painting to get troops on the table, honestly. And I know your Venn diagram doesn't really have terrain making on it, but that's an area where Miles and I are in agreement. Like, where would
Mm.
you put terrain or crafting on your Venn diagram?
Mine barely registers. I don't. I'm not a bad painter. I enjoy collecting. I enjoy painting. But the it's like pulling. If I think I'm going to do some terrain, it's like somebody pulls my enthusiasm plug out. Um, so I do it and I tolerate it when I have to. Uh, it's not my thing. It really
I
isn't.
tend to bunch my painting up for the painting challenge for Kurt's little event.
Yeah,
The Analog Copies painting challenge. I get it all done in those 3 months, and then I'm just terrain making the rest of the year.
yeah. That certainly sounds like a way forward. Certainly sounds like a way forward. Um, we've done a little bit of an introduction there. So I know you guys, and you mentioned earlier on, have just been to Historicon, and I thought it'd be an interesting to just have a quick chat around your thoughts on the show. I've had a look at your video that was on. I think Greg, you were on that one with somebody else from the
Tony.
Little Wars, Tony. Um, so what was your overall view of the show then?
Well, Miles and I probably have two very different perspectives here because I
Mm.
ran one event and Miles was running events the entire time. And when all you do is kind of run games, you don't have nearly as much time to go around and look at games. So I think Miles will probably provide you a very different perspective. I love Historicon. It's my favorite show of the year. The venue's awesome. The energy's awesome. I thought this year there were a lot of young people. Actually, the last few years there's been an uptick. I think just genuinely in young people. But it definitely felt to me that Saturday was a lot slower than I was used to. I also find it very suspicious that HMGS will not release numbers for this year's show. I have talked to a couple of former members of the HMGS board who said that attendance was definitely down from the previous 2 years, even though they're reporting it was the highest ever. And you could feel that. Like, you definitely could feel Saturday was a little bit slower. And I don't know how to explain that. I really don't, because I mean, I had a great time. I thought it was a great show. But I do wish that there'd been maybe some more people there on Saturday. What was your read on that, Miles?
I thought overall the show was great. The energy level is high. There's a continual increase in the number of young people. I ran 6 games. I did the Russo-Japanese War, which is pretty esoteric. In all of my games, I had 50% more players than I could handle. And I always come to the con with 10 or so kind of fake British medals to hand out to young people for playing the game, like give them an award. I ran out of those things halfway through Friday. So we had lots of young people. I had a lot of women players, which again is quite rare. So from a demographic viewpoint, I was really pleased by the diversity of the crowd. and the enthusiasm. I would agree with Greg. Saturday it really slowed down. I don't know if it's a shift in convention going, but by Saturday evening it was a ghost town. And in fact, I had planned to stay in the hotel Saturday night. I just left to go home that time and had a great time. Now I know the convention's gone through a change of leadership. We're not going to drag you through the silliness of HMGS, the politics of the group. It's a bunch of volunteers who really like to squabble, but they're doing the best they can. I would say from a event registration, there were probably more events than usual. I think probably there's like 600 events, games that are run during the con. Most of them seem to be full. My guess is attendance was flattish. If you're talking to the older guys, they've got the former guys, they've got a bit of an axe to grind. If you're talking to the current guys, they've got a bit of an axe to grind. We don't know, but my guess is there's probably 2,000 people there, which is giant for a U.S. show. Probably not so giant for a UK show.
Yeah, we probably only have 3 or 4 that are bigger than that. I think when you guys come and go to Salute, that's very different to most other shows in terms of attendance. So, how many days does Historicon go for?
It runs for 3 days. They say 4. There's like a handful of games on that Wednesday night, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday morning there's a free event. There's a vendor hall that runs all 3 days. So it's because of the distances people travel, I think they have to make it a bit more of a draw. Again, I go every year. I look forward to it. I had a great time. It's an incredibly cheap event to go to. When you look at the cost of the convention itself, I think it's like $70. If you run games like I do or Greg does, they let you in for free. It's other U.S. conventions are much more expensive to attend, but you tend to get more activities also.
It's certainly on my bucket list. A friend of mine, Andy Dickinson, was over there, and he really enjoys it. And he's gone from there to Comic Con, so he's having a bit of a trip in the States at the moment, which is lovely. So in terms of big games, then there was quite a few. I mean, Greg, on the video, was it a 54 mil Gettysburg game?
There was, yeah. It was on 3 separate tables, and each of those 3 tables was like more than 20 feet long. So it was just a monstrous display. And you see some really big displays at Historicon. That was probably the biggest like footprint, but there are some just really massive games there, which is, I mean, it's super fun to go and see. People spend all year like making their game that they're going to put on at Historicon. I actually talked to multiple people at the show who have already started planning their big game for 2025 Historicon because it takes so much time to build some of the tables. So that's a fun reason to go.
I thought the quality of the tables this year was better than most years.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I heard Richard Clark mention that as well. He has not been over here to the U.S. to Historicon since pre-COVID, and is the very first thing he said to me when I asked him, "Hey, what do you think of the show?" It was the first time he was at this new venue too.
Yeah.
And his first comment was, "The games look a lot better than I remember," and I do think that's a trend for sure.
I would expect Richard would take credit for that.
Is there anything he doesn't take credit for? He's a good lad.
He's a lovely man.
He is. He's very, very good chap. And he comes from a village not far from where I was born as well, which is really unusual. We didn't know until we started chatting about it. So yeah, me and Mr. Clark are nearby relatives, or something similar. American conventions, though, then some games stay up for all the time, and then other games are just doing a session and are packed away. How does that work in terms of organisation?
It's a free registration service. So as a GM, you go onto this awful system to register your games, and like I run my games the entire convention, so I just stay up the entire time. I ran the Wrestle Japanese War as a campaign. 6 games, a couple thousand miniatures, 10 players per game. Other people come and they'll like Greg. Ran a game for 4 players, so he sets down, and he's off on his way. It's up to whatever the GM wants to do because it's a volunteer workforce that runs the game. So the big difference is there really isn't anything like a demonstration game. All of the games, the anticipation is they are participation games. You will bring players in, you'll teach them the rules, they will play the game for 3 to 4 hours, and then move on to go play their next game. We don't have kind of the club demonstration games. I remember when I went to Salute in 2019, you got the guys with the backs to the audience playing their game, and you feel like you're being rude as you kind of try to peek in to see what's going on.
So is there a vogue period in the US at the moment? Is there something that is everyone's playing? Was there something that was more prevalent at the show than anything else?
Boy, that's an interesting question. World War II, of course, you're going to see more World War II games than anything else, but that's always been the case. So I wouldn't say that World War II is in vogue in that regard. There are periods that do seem to become trendy, usually based around like a new rule set that's come out. But honestly, at the moment, nothing that I can think of is really that popular in the rules zeitgeist. I mean, can you think of something that I'm missing, Miles? I can't think of like an in vogue game.
Yeah, the theme, each convention has a theme that never really drives anything. I think Skirmish World War II is incredibly popular because there's a lot of rule sets. And once you have your platoon of Germans or Americans or British, you can use them in any rule set you want. The terrain is the same. And so it's multifunctional. I think because Richard was there, the Lardy group, which is a cult, let's just call it what it is. It's a cult. We're out in force and just put on astonishing games, both from a terrain aspect, a whole bunch of chain of command, which is a game that I don't really know that well, but they seem to be having a whole hell of a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I think that's the general zeitgeist with the Lardy stuff is fun.
Yeah. I asked Richard about his new bolt action rule set coming out, and he didn't seem to like that.
Did he not?
Well, Ken, since you asked about what's in vogue, one thing I do want to mention, which a couple of us were talking about at the show this year in regards to the terrain, because the terrain on a lot of these tables does appear to just be like, it's been getting nicer over the last couple of years. And I think what's really driving that, and you could see it in the vendor hall, is the number of tables now that have a large amount of 3D printed terrain has just exploded. And that means that the quality of the terrain on a lot of these tables, I think, has just gotten a lot higher because you can get really nice 3D printed terrain in any scale that you could imagine. And you walk around, the games that were on at Historicon, and I mean, 75% of them had at least some amount of 3D printed terrain, if not like the whole board. And you see it in the vendor hall too. Every year there are more and more vendors who are stocking or selling 3D printed terrain. There were multiple guys there who had printers running, at their table in the vendor hall. So I think you're going to just keep seeing more and more of that.
I think it's very flexible. 3D printing. I'm not sure yet, still with figures, but for terrain, like you say, Greg, you can scale it to whatever you want. It's easier to design because it's straight line stuff most of the time. And I'm putting together a Narvik game for about a year away. And it 1/700 scale. So to build the town and the port and the railway line and the iron ore, all that sort of stuff is going to be so much easier based on that. It's not something I can just pop down to a company and buy off the shelf.
And it's also really easy. It's light to transport. I agree with Greg that I think 3D printing is taking the terrain aspect out. I didn't see a lot of MDF vendors in the vendor hall. There's a couple, My guess is like, the big resin cast buildings, you don't see those anymore. The MDF ones, my guess is that they are, their days are numbered also because you can just get more quality out of a 3D printer. I did see some fabulous 3D printed medieval figures from a vendor whose name escapes me. I bought a good number of Byzantines from him. They're 28 millimeter. If you just looked at them, you didn't pick them up, you'd swear they were metal. So I think the technology is still coming. I think it will have a material impact on the hobby and the distribution of product, but we're still probably 5-10 years away from the majority of figures being 3D printed. But I think that's an inevitability. Just like 15 years ago, if I told you plastic figures are going to be the majority of figures in people's collections, you'd laugh at me. And now most people, when they get into the hobby, they buy a box of plastics.
Yeah, I'm running the World Cup of Historical Wargames miniatures manufacturers at the moment, and some of the more established metal figures. The one I'm thinking of particularly is AB Miniatures, which is Tony Barton's stuff, which is the pinnacle of 18 mil
It's the best.
Napoleonics. Yeah, there was a lot of people, sort of 30 to 40, who'd never heard of them,
Mm-hmm.
which was a real surprise. And a lot of people are buying and converting plastics instead of buying any metals at all. So that's been quite an education for me during the course of the competition that's still going on.
And speaking of that competition, vote Pendragon.
They're doing very well, aren't they? They're doing very well.
I have been following your World Cup. Interesting idea. Where'd you come up with it?
I ran one last year for pardon me, for Wargames rules. So this is like the second version. And World Cups go around in 4-year cycles. So possibly next year's will be military leaders. We can have some good fights over that one. That'll be a good one. But the original idea came from a UK podcast called The Rest is History. And they've done like World Cups of British Prime Ministers and World Cups of Greek gods and all sorts of stuff. So it's a very good podcast if you haven't listened to it. General history, they do something different every week.
Nice. I'll add it to my podcast
Yeah.
library.
They
Yeah.
stole it from the NCAA tournament, Greg.
It's been fun. It's been fun, and we're on the quarterfinals.
And where are the Perrys?
Don't you start, Miles. Don't you start. The swear meter went off repeatedly with the Perry's thing. Every single time. Where's the Perry's? They're not in it yet. They're a seed. And you can, yeah, I think you can be polite for a certain amount of time when people ask you the same obvious question that's in the writing, and then you get to the sweary bit, and then it just goes downhill from there. But there we go. So one thing I did want to just talk about briefly, you guys on the channel did the graying of the hobby, or is the hobby dying question a few years ago, that got loads of reaction and loads of people did like response videos and stuff. And you've mentioned it already, but there did seem to be a lot of new people, or young kids at the show at Historicon from the videos that I've seen. So how is your perspective now on that subject that you brought up a few years ago?
I think there's two things. One, we helped Jasper with his data analysis from the Great Wargaming Survey. And when you look at that survey, there's a definite age bubble of people. Each year, you can see the bubble moving as it goes up, but it's roughly the same 10,000 people every year. So it's a biased sample. And I think what it doesn't get is all of the people who don't subscribe to magazines, who come to gaming potentially because of video gaming, who come to gaming potentially because of GW, which is not the devil. I'll presage a potential answer down the road.
Yeah.
And so I think, when we look at it from a very traditional wargamer sense, that group is graying. But there's a whole new group of gamers who are different, who might be more interested in skirmish gaming, who may not be willing to do the same level of preparatory effort you have to put on a big game because they just have so many other entertainment alternatives. So, from what I saw at Historicon was a much more diverse group, still mostly male, but a lot more females than before. A lot of young kids, and so I walked away. I think quite happy with the prospects of our hobby growing, but it's going to change. It won't be the same hobby that it was 20 years ago.
Greg, how did you see things at the show?
Anecdotally, things I think, demographically looked better at the show and have been looking better at the show. But I want to emphasize the word anecdotally, right? I mean, that's not data. That's just Miles and I looking around and seeing a lot more young people. And let's be honest, when I say a lot more young people, I mean like I saw 15 kids this year instead of none.
Mm.
So it's still not right. Or I saw 30 women instead of 5. Like it's still
It's a good percentage
98.
increase, though, isn't it?
Well, it is.
It's still under 5%.
It's still, yeah, we still have a long way to go. And if Miles mentioned the Great Wargaming Survey that Guy and Jasper run, I mean those numbers are not good. And that is data. Like those are hard numbers and they're not promising. But Miles pointed out rightly there could be sample size issues. The numbers that I could look at to give you a more optimistic view would be the YouTube channel analytics that we have for Little Wars TV. YouTube gives you very robust analytics. You can do a lot of deep diving into that. And I have because it's interesting. Our audience has not really changed that much over 6 years. I mean, it's still, 98% male. But the age distribution is interesting, and it always has been. 50% of our audience is under the age of 35.
Wow.
And we're a historical wargaming channel. So that number I find very interesting. Of course, there's a little bit of selection bias there because we're on YouTube. YouTube is a younger skewing platform generally. But I think that that's promising. I mean, that means that there are a significant number of younger gamers, and let's be honest, under 35 is young as far as historical war gamers go. Significant proportion of people in that younger age bracket who are watching a bunch of guys push toy soldiers around and refight the Battle of Gettysburg. So that I think is that's good news. Like that's some good data, and that makes me hopeful.
Well, the one thing we haven't figured out, because we look at the comments from them, we constantly get barraged by comments. How do I get started? How do I buy that army? And we haven't figured out how to make it really easy to get started in historicals, like GW does. It's really easy to get hooked on the GW crack cocaine by buying the box set, and then But I think as an industry, we need to find a way to make it easier for that kid who wants to start. Here's where you go, because it's actually quite confusing.
Yeah, I think Warlord Games are the ones who are coming on with that, with like the Epic series.
Indeed, they're all ex-GW guys. What a shock!
Yeah.
No, but you're right, and that is the correct model. That's definitely the right model. I think one of the other challenges in the historical side, though, is even as you find more companies who are getting a little savvier on box sets and on social media. Warlord is a good example. Before them, Battlefront with their Flames of War stuff, they were doing a really good job. It's still just such a small and fractured hobby. Games Workshop is the 800-pound gorilla in the room for sci-fi and fantasy. On the historical side, there is no 800-pound gorilla. I mean, Warlord, I guess you could say, is one of the bigger companies, but there's so much competition.
It's a rhesus monkey
Right.
compared to GW. And that's not meant as a slight. It's just, much smaller.
Yeah, more competition, more companies, a lot more of a cottage industry, which I think there's a lot of positives to that. You get a lot more innovation in our hobby, I think, than you get under Games Workshop because there's so many companies who are trying stuff. But I do think that makes it really hard for a new player. Like, where's your entry point into this? So much choice, too much choice. It is actually a problem for them.
Yeah. I think you can once you're in, that choice is a fantastic thing to have because you can go down the period, history scale, set of rules that you want to do. But when you first come in, something I was talking about on a show with Alex Sutherland not that long ago, it's so bewildering because there's no overarching set of rules that everyone plays. There's no, it's not, you're covering the whole period of history, so it's not a game. So I can see why it is difficult.
And your competition is I could do this, or I could play Call of Duty on my computer,
Hmm,
which I download and I'm ready to go, or I can play Total War. And so, the competition for leisure hours is pretty fierce.
yeah,
And so, I think as an industry, we got to find ways. I think one of the reasons we came out with Ravens Feast, which was what Greg and some former club members came out with, was to find ways to make it easy for people to get into the hobby.
excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, guys. I'm gonna move things on because I'm conscious of time. So because I want to do the quiz, and I'm sure you do or don't, but you're doing it. So 20 questions. We'll go Greg Miles, Greg Miles, Greg Miles as we go through it. I'm sure you've heard it before, and I'm sure you're aware there's a massive regional bias in it. So most answers are a simple yes or no, or a one or the other. But it's a good opportunity to rapidly go through 20 topics and have a quick discussion about them. So, are we happy with that, chaps?
Let's go.
Ready to go.
Awesome. So, Greg, go big or go home?
Big.
Big, good lad. Miles,
Oh, big.
excellent. Doing well so far on question one. Question two. Contrast paints, are they great or a gimmick?
Never
Greg,
tried them.
never tried them.
I love my Army speed paints. I think they're the greatest thing in the world. They make an idiot painter like me look semi-intelligent.
Decent answer. Decent answer. Not sure how this will translate to America, but are you going to use posh, expensive Winsor and Newton paintbrushes or Yorkshire made Pro Art?
I
Greg.
have had the same paintbrushes for 15 years, and I don't think I paid more than a couple dollars for them.
Oh,
Every year, just prior to the start of the Analog Hobbies Painting Challenge, I get a new set of Winsor & Newton paintbrushes, and they last me the year. I love my Winsor & Newton Series 7s.
How much are they paying you, Miles? Dear God.
they're so expensive. I nearly fainted when I found out how much they were compared to Pro Art. Anyway,
I'm an
yes, you
influencer
could.
now. They give them to me for free. No, they don't. They don't.
No, they
Don't
don't.
get mad at me. It's worth the money.
So, question four. 96 figures, Greg. Is that an army or a unit of pike?
That is a skirmish game.
Excellent. So, we'd like to see. Miles?
I was going to say it's a unit of pipe.
Yeah, small unit of pike
Yeah.
as well. Question six. Sorry, five. 6x4 table, big or small game? Greg?
Depends on the scale figures you have on them.
Oh,
If
oh.
I'm playing in my preferred scale, 6 mil, 6x4 is a big table, perfectly suitable.
Yep.
I kind of
Excellent.
look at it as a standard table because we've got multiple 6x4 tables at the club that we can kind of assemble into what we want. And again, I'm going to give the same answer, Greg. It depends on scale. Most of what we do is smaller, 10 to 6 millimeters. So we get more of a battle in because we like the maneuver aspect, not just line them up and run over and so you can roll more sixes.
Excellent. That's what we like to see. Question six. Points-based army or historical order of battle? Greg?
I'm ashamed that you even need to ask that question, Ken. That's an embarrassing question.
I'll put you for a tick then. I'll give you a point for that.
Thank
Miles?
Greg is
you.
an itinerant tournament player. He
Yeah,
loves
right.
I think we're both historical on this one, Ken.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. That's what I like to hear. There's no bias whatsoever, but that's really what I like to hear. So you're doing a bit of painting. Do you mix your paints in a wet palette or an old bit of MDF?
I have I have a scrap plastic bag that I'm looking at right now on my painting table.
Nice. That's worth a point. That is worth a point.
I have a wet
I,
palette that grows mold
um,
as well as allow
yeah.
me to mix my paint. So I get a little texture in there too.
Well, was it you that got the cure for COVID then from your wet palette?
That's right. That's where we got the vaccines from. You're welcome, by the way. It was Vallejo Iraqi sand was the medium that grew the.
Excellent. I'm sure there's a couple of conspiracy theories in there that can start as a result of that. Question 8. Undercoated figures. Do you go black or white, Greg?
Oh, 100% black.
Good man.
I
Miles?
go gray. I use an auto primer I get from Walmart.
Yeah. I know what you mean. That's not too bad. Not too bad. So, I'm not sure how this is going to go down in the US.
Oh,
Question 9. Hot drinks. Would you have Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee? Greg?
I mean, coffee, tea. Come on, Ken, please.
I got to go coffee, Ken.
Oh.
You know,
We are Americans through and through.
We did win that war for a reason.
We're never going to get over that tea party, are we?
No.
It just divides us. We've got more or less the same language, but that is the big divide between our
Let's just
nations.
say Greg and I are marked safe from monarchy yet again. Well, for the moment.
Yeah, right till November.
I'm not going to turn the podcast into a political discussion, but as a monarchist myself, I think I've got the upper hand when it comes to democracy and how that's gone over the last few years.
We'll see. We'll fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. You never know. You might vote King Charles in. You might be that fed up with your candidates. You might go. Everyone's going to go Charles III. Tick on your ballots. You heard it here first.
You seem to have a spare running around there. Maybe we can borrow him. He's over here all the time anyway.
Oh, that one. Oh, you can have him. You can have him. No longer required. Surplus to requirements. Question 10. Wargames units. Do you like the figures obviously correct for the period? Do you like the figures tightly packed or socially distanced?
Very tightly packed.
Socially distant.
Ooh. You like to spread them out?
I like to spread them out because I don't want to paint that many.
Reasonable. Greg, would you prefer a 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Definitely, my opinion on this has evolved over the last 10 years. I would have answered the monster weekend game, but I'm definitely in the 2-hour club game camp right now. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and then let's play another one, something different.
I'm in the same way, both for the same reasons that Greg mentioned, also that I'm just lucky enough to be a member of this club that has such wonderful people in it. I always enjoy going up Monday nights to play with them and consider myself extremely fortunate that they lower their standards for a brief second to let me in.
I have to say, I am interminably lazy and I can't be bothered to put a game away after 2 hours. It needs to stay up for longer.
Well, we've had games that stay up week to week, so we have that disease also.
That's all right then. That's all right. I'm a bit worried about people putting away a game after 2 hours. It just makes me twitch a little bit. 40 years getting a collection of figures together, and then it gets shoved off the table after 2 hours. Well, never mind. Right. So, question 12 again. Let's see how this goes over in the States. Avocado. Are they just posh mushy peas? Greg?
No, absolutely not. I love avocado.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and this is a trick question that no one's gotten.
Posh.
There's no such thing as posh mushy peas. Mushy peas are
there
awful.
is.
They can't be posh. It's a logical relationship.
You can have a little touch of mint, tiny little bit of sugar, a little bit of parsley on top of them.
This is a cultural disconnect for sure.
I'm gonna have to go avocado.
Did you guys not have fish chips and mushy peas when you came over to England?
Of course.
I have fish and chips all the time. I may just leave the little green stuff on the side of the plate.
What can I say? What can I say? Avocado and tea, things that divide our great nations. Right, universal question. Question 13. Don't let me down, guys, on this one. Round dice, spherical dice, are they allowed on your table or are they banned? Greg?
Round dice?
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever seen a round die.
Do you have marbles in the US?
Yes.
Yeah, so a dice like a marble.
Never seen one, and I don't
But they're
care
hollow
to.
and they've got a weight that holds them down.
Yeah,
No,
and they never
unacceptable. Unacceptable. No, I don't want to encounter
Excellent.
that.
Excellent. That's what we like to see. Miles,
I feel that I should not limit any man's choice in dice. So if that's what they want
you
to roll,
should.
they can.
You
Should.
should.
I'm just being different. I just want to be the one person who said they're okay.
Good man. I can't. I've got one. Somebody gave me one at a show, and because of the weight, it never actually lands on a number. So you roll it across the table, and it knocks like 15 pikes off and couple of arquebus and somebody's head,
See, but
and it's
if I roll
still
them
not
across the
actually comes up with a
table
number.
and I take out my opponent's troops, those count as casualties.
Yeah, we're kind of going actual H.G. Wells little wars there, aren't we?
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Still banned. Um, Question 14, the relatively new question, and it's. I'm hoping you guys are going to get this one right. Well, obviously not right. Let's. It's not
Well,
bias quiz
there's a
anymore. It's
right,
April
Ken.
Fool.
We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. So you're choosing measurements for your rules. Do you use the glorious British imperial system or French money?
We definitely use the imperial system. That would be my preference, and honestly, pretty much every game that I see here in the U.S. it's in inches. It's very, very rare to see a game in centimeters here.
Fantastic.
We have to
Miles?
use inches. We would be wrong if we didn't.
Exactly.
And worse, we would be French.
Oh, no. And as I always say to denigrators of the imperial system, how many people who use the metric system have landed a man on the moon?
Ooh, zing!
It's a difficult
Well said,
question, isn't
Ken.
it? A difficult question. So, question 15. Do you like a good table in a set of rules, like a casualty table or an armor penetration table, or do you like things a lot simpler? Greg?
That's a good question. I like to see a simple table. Simple table. Miles knows
Yeah,
what I'm saying. No, Miles understands. I'm not looking for a 6-page QRS. If there's a game that has a 6-page QRS, Miles, that's not a quick reference sheet. I've
it's
seen
not
entire
six.
games that are shorter than 6 pages.
One, it's only 8 sides for the QRS for GDA. I actually prefer no tables because we like big games with lots of units, and looking up tables slows play down. So I'd rather just see D6 with some modifiers.
It's question 16. 28 mil is king. Yes or no? Greg?
No.
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 If I had it to do over again, I would do everything in 10.
Through Pendragon?
And Leon's not paying me to say that, though. Vote Pendragon. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
So a quick subliminal vote Pendragon will come up on the screen.
Oh, did I say that? I don't remember
on the
saying
YouTube.
that.
Yeah. We'll see how they get on. So unpainted miniatures allowed on the table? Yes or no?
No.
No, with the exception if it's a kid. If it's a kid, you let them in.
No, Miles. The answer is no.
Greg is the mean game.
Oh, dear me. Right. Question 18. This is football. You call it soccer. It is football. Bradford City or Leeds United? Does that mean anything to either of you?
Yes.
I am aware of both teams and do not have a rooting interest.
I'm going to say Arsenal because my partner
Oh,
in my
nice.
firm is a huge Hotspur fan, Tottenham, and therefore hates Arsenal. So I always say Arsenal at every chance I can get.
That's fair enough. Can't argue with that. Question 19. Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
What's the other place over the hill?
It's like West
Lancashire.
Virginia, Greg. They don't know.
Lancashire.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know if you know this, Ken, but we game in York, Pennsylvania, and over the other side of the river is Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
I
interesting.
was born in York, Pennsylvania, and that's where the club is. So obviously, in this case, if those are my choices, I am voting Yorkshire.
Good lad.
I have to vote Yorkshire also, but I think Yorkshire is just a suburb in Mayfair in London. It's just a made up place.
No, we have much better mushy peas than London.
Well, apparently.
Question 20. Games Workshop. Are they the work of the devil? Yes or no?
No, absolutely not. I don't enjoy playing any of their games, but it's how I got into the hobby, and I think it's great for historical gaming. Actually, it's a great gateway.
I think they've done a giant service for historicals for recruiting people with crappy games who like the tangible feel of miniatures and the craft aspect. And as a business person, I am very impressed with the business they've built because they, 15, 17 years ago, they were on the ropes. And they've showed the value of IP, which is one of those big reasons. It's hard to invest in historical gaming because there is no IP. And when you have IP, you can create excess rents, which these guys have managed to do very, very well.
Oh, thank you very much. Wargames Room 101 is a place where we can stick our most hated things from Wargames. And this is what they call in training courses a free space where you can say whatever you want. And then when you do say whatever you want in a training course, you get hauled over the coals for it the next day because it isn't actually a free space. But this one is. So, Miles, I think you shouted up and say you do have an entry
I
for Wargame.
do. Mine is something I take over from my business world is that I cannot stand people who feel compelled to point out your mistakes, whether it's a painting mistake, whether it's you got this rule wrong, it's a game. We're meant to have fun, and you want to create a safe environment. The world is filled with idiots who can point out problems. There are precious few people who actually try to correct the problems or take the risk to create the problems, and those are the ones who are actually worth a damn. So
Yeah.
if I've gotten my cuff color wrong, you can laugh at me to yourself. Don't bring it up. I don't care.
Well, I did a podcast with the 20-sided gamified podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Oh,
called.
with Jared, yeah.
Yeah, not that long ago, and I admitted on there that I have in the past done things deliberately wrong, posted pictures up on just to wind people up, especially on TMP. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Oh,
We,
God.
we don't we don't go there. I've
No.
been banned from TNP.
I
Oh,
did
you've been
not know
banned.
that.
Yes, I was banned. The guy who runs it posted some misleading stats, and I had my guys pull the right stats, and they put them on there, and I've been banned for life.
You're not missing much, Miles.
That's okay. I'm not.
I haven't been banned. Lots of my friends have
And
been banned.
I often do that in convention games. I put something out there, and as players come up, it helps me identify the problem players.
Good idea. Good idea. Mike, have you got one that you'd like to shove in the vault and get rid of?
Absolutely. And I already
Mm-hmm.
tipped my hand and told it to you. A quick reference sheet is one piece of paper. It is singular. QRS is singular. It can be double-sided. You can have something printed on both sides. But
Yeah.
all kidding aside, this is actually like a giant pet peeve of mine. And guys in the club know that I am like very, very aggressive about reformatting people's quick reference sheets. So like if there's a game we really enjoy, I will go home and type out my version of the quick reference sheet. because I find it amazing how poor the quality is of QRSs in a lot of games. First, of course, is the fact that there are QRSs that are more than one page, but also another big pet peeve of mine is when the quick reference sheet doesn't tell you how to play the game. It's just like a collection of tables where you still need to open the rule book to even find something as simple as the frickin' turn sequence. Like you should be able to hand a player one piece of paper, and that should enable them to mostly play the game. And of course, if you've got to look something up in the book for a special circumstance, that's what the book is for. But the QRS is there to enable you to play quickly. And I find that many games pay very little attention to this. The Osprey books, all their like blue book series, really guilty of this. Some of them don't even have a quick reference sheet in the book, which is just crazy to me.
I did sense a little bit of tension earlier on with has Miles got a set that's got 6 pages? Did you say?
He goes off. Sometimes you just have to shove him in a closet, and he just rages for a while. He'll calm down in about a half hour.
Yeah, I think what annoys me most is when people redo fast play sheets and they actually just put what's on the 6 pages, but do it in a smaller font.
Yes.
There is a minimum font size.
Yes.
That happened to us at works. We at work we had like a 14-page form that we had to fill out for a certain thing, so we complained the bucket full. This is absolutely ridiculous. And then some management went, "Oh well, we've reduced it to 7 pages now." And it's like, how fucking stupid do you think we are? It's the same 14 pages in a smaller font.
So, Greg, is a 8-page QRSS okay? It's it's got multiple sheets.
No, unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I think it's a not so quick references sheet, really. That isn't it? It's way off the chart.
It's an abstract. We'll call it a rules abstract.
Yeah. I forgot to give you scores, by the way. Greg, 60%. Miles, 45.
Yes.
Ooh.
Not as in inverted commas bad as Sean Clark, but
I was hoping to set the bar.
yes, no, Sean Clark did that with 30%.
I can't be that.
He was a long way off with Sean, bless him. And you could tell when he was answering a question correctly, because by now most people know what the correct answer is. He was biting his teeth on some, but he just couldn't give the wrong answer. Poor lad. So we'll move on then. You guys are known for Little Wars TV. So I thought, because the channel is kind of come back to life, and you've done that teaser video where you hold the door and not quite open it. I thought it'd be a good idea just to get you guys on and have a chat about where things are with the channel and things that's going on. So, who would be the best one to do like a very brief potted history of Little Wars TV?
That would be Greg.
Ken, I assume that most of your listeners probably are familiar somewhat with Little Wars TV. So we'll make it a very brief history.
Sure.
Our club has been around for 22 years, gaming together. And about 7 years ago, we decided that we could make some YouTube videos. We were going to do 10 battles. That was the whole concept of Little Wars TV. Let's do 10 famous battles of history. But we had a lot of fun doing it, and people seemed to enjoy it. So we just kept going. And 6 years later, we never really stopped. So that's the whole potted history.
So I like that. Well, so how many subscribers does Little Wars TV have at the moment?
I think it's about 85,000.
Wow. And for a Wargames channel and a historical Wargames channel like that, that's stratospheric, isn't it?
We are the largest historical wargaming channel on YouTube, which is a very low bar, but yes, we are the biggest.
Oh dear me, I like that. So, what I do like about your channel, and it's something that I try to do as well, is to try and do just not the same old rehash stuff, to try and do different things. Like I do the World Cups and stuff like that, and you go out to battlefields and you actually talk to like people, the guides and stuff like that. It's all very well done. Do you have an ideas guy, or is it like a committee that come up with these ideas for the shows?
Anybody in the club is welcome to throw out ideas for the show, and a lot of guys in the club have had really good ideas. I mean, I personally think that the reason the channel still exists is because we have such good buy-in from members of the club. The channel's not called, Greg's Club, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not called Miles's Wargame channel, right? I mean, it is
Oh,
I do a lot of the video editing. I do almost all the video editing, but other guys in the club are totally invested in playing games, writing scripts, designing scenarios, creating the terrain, or painting the armies that you see. And I think the fact that guys can feel free to suggest whatever topic interests them, uh, that's why we're still doing it. Because if you just had like one person who said, "Hey guys, here's what we're going to be doing," over time, I think people would lose interest in that, right? Like people want to be able to say, "Hey, I'm interested in putting on a game for X," and that's cool, and viewers clearly respond to that as well. So like the games that you see on YouTube, it's not us trying to get as many views as possible. It's just it's whatever we're interested in, and if people find that cool, great. And there have been some surprises for sure. Like, I mean, one of the surprises to me, I'll give you two big surprises, one positive, one negative. Uh, I was stunned at the number of people who enjoyed our Vietnam episode. I was convinced that that was just like a totally niche period that we were into at the time. I didn't think people were into Vietnam gaming. You rarely see people do Vietnam. But that got a ton of views, and people were like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Like, because we haven't seen this before. So that was a very positive surprise. The other end of the spectrum, and then I'm going to let Miles jump in with any surprises he's got. We did a Star Wars episode several years ago, and
hmm.
I'm really into Star Wars. There's a bunch of guys in the club who love Star Wars, and I thought to myself when we were making that, like, "Oh, this is going to be big. Like, this could be like the biggest video we've ever made. We're going to get so many views out of this." One of the lowest viewed videos in the history of the channel. And we still had a blast making it. I mean, I would do it again in a heartbeat because we made it because we wanted to. But it just goes to show that you can't predict what ideas other people are going to find appealing. So there's really no use in trying. Like, you might as well just do whatever you want to do because you'll never be able to guess.
I think one of the appeals of the channel is a lot of war gamers are looking for a sense of community. We see that in our Discord. We see that they're looking to find like-minded people. And they sense, they can tell when we're having fun in a game, and they can tell when we're mailing in it. Another episode that I fully expected would do really well because it was a very popular rule set. It was a St. Nazarene raid with bolt action. None of us like playing that game. We're not big bolt action fans, and we're not very good actors. I think that translated through. I don't think that video was very well received. It was a beautiful table, and so I think when someone in the club wants to do something, everyone else wants to support that person, and they will it to be fun. Even it may not be the greatest game in the world, we're going to have a great time playing it, and I think that translates onto the screen. One, because Greg is a really skillful editor, thank God, because the rest of us are too lazy to do it. But I think it's actually quite genuine.
Mm.
I've said this a few times. I'm going to be a little saccharine about it. We're very fortunate to have the group of people we have in that club. There's not a person in that club that I don't consider a dear friend. We hope that translates out. And as long as this continues to be fun, I look forward to doing more, as long as Greg edits.
Yeah, I think enthusiasm is absolutely key. It's one one thing that people say to me about my show is you're into it, and I don't have guests on to get likes or whatever. I did 2 hours with a guy who makes paintbrushes. Uh,
which was a great episode. I was fascinated
I've
by it.
learned so much. It was just absolutely amazing. But I think you guys are the same. If you enjoying it, it comes across on the show. Whereas I think you said that, Miles, you're not actors. So if it isn't something you're into, people are going to notice, aren't they?
Yeah. The other thing I think is when we do campaigns, people really pick up when it's a multi-episode event because they build, they get excited. Campaigns are a lot of work. They are a lot of work, but I hope we can do some more. But those are always the funnest episodes.
I think I watched I think it was the 1813 Napoleonic
Yeah,
campaign recently, and I was getting so into it. I'm going, why are you moving that up there? Stop, stop, don't go up there, don't go up there. And I was, I was what they call it, invested in it. I really enjoyed that. It was great to see. So what you seem to do is you don't seem to. Um, be salesmen. You're not pitching products for people. Is that something you avoid? Have you been approached to do that?
We are approached every week to do that.
Yeah.
Kickstarters, people want us to promote their Kickstarter, minis, I mean, totally unrelated companies. And I'll be honest, it's surprisingly hard to turn
Mm.
down free money. None of us are doing this for
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, you know what? I'll pay you $2,500 to promote this Kickstarter."
Yeah.
$2,500 for a lot of guys in the club is not an inconsequential amount of money.
Mm.
So it's shockingly tempting to be like, "Well, maybe this one time," or "Well, maybe for 2,500." But you have to maintain your discipline on that. We've never promoted
Mm.
a Kickstarter on the channel, and we were asked to do so. And Miles, I believe, was privy to this email chain as recently as like less than a week ago.
yeah.
We
Please don't do
we
that.
we were requested to promote a Kickstarter, and the answer is just no. And the joke, of course, in the case that I'm talking about for this past week is it was a gamer who we know, a company that we like. I mean, it's someone that I would ordinarily want to help, but I just don't think it's a good look for the channel, right? Like we don't want to sell. We don't want to be salespeople. I think that ruins your credibility and your authenticity the moment that your viewers realize, oh, well, they're just selling rule books for Warlord, right? They're selling
Mm.
Warlord box sets. Like that's not who we are. It's not
Mm.
what we want
There's
to
an
be.
aspect of that. I think it also stifles creativity. If
Yes.
suddenly I have to do something for manufacturer X, this is no longer a hobby. It's kind of a job, even though the money is inconsequential to me. I don't care about that. I think it's really important to have that creative independence that we're doing something because we want to do it, not because we
Mm.
have an obligation.
Yeah.
And I think when this becomes an obligation, I think that's when it becomes problematic.
So you at I'm thinking about new members to the club. Is it something you get often, or is it that original group of guys who started off in that war game shop or comic store, wasn't it? I think originally, all those years ago. Or do you have new members coming in on a regular basis?
We do get new members. Actually, a lot of the guys who were there 20 plus years ago at the comic store, a lot of those guys are
Mm.
still at the club. That
Yeah.
core group of about 10 guys, most of them still game together. But every year we pick up a couple. Miles is a relatively new member of the club. I mean, what do
Mm.
you think, Miles? Was it 5, 6 years ago that you joined Wargames?
2018. I saw your advertising campaign. You put posters above the urinals at Historicon when you were announcing the channel. You saw what kind of draw you got from that. You haven't done that advertising campaign ever again after you got me. But I joined right when they first started. And we've gotten a couple new members because of the channel. We're pretty selective though. You got to come in and you can't be an ass, and so we watch that. We get a lot of people asking, and it's always a tricky question because we have a really good thing here now, and you don't want to introduce a lot of random people. Look, they introduced me. They don't ever want to do that again. They've learned a lesson, so they've raised their standards more.
It is a tricky question. Like I don't know how other clubs handle this, but I mean I feel somewhat guilty in saying like we are not a public gaming group, right? We don't meet in a public space anymore. We used to. We used to meet in the back of a comic book shop and look, if somebody walked in, I mean, it's a public space, right? Like they can hang around and they can watch, maybe eventually play with you, but we meet in a private space. It's a private club, and I do sometimes feel a little badly that we are kind of restrictive in who we let in to the club because we have a great group dynamic, and it only takes a couple of people with different personalities to kind of upset that dynamic. So there's a constant tension that I feel. I know Miles feels it as well, where you want to welcome new members, right? Like I told you when we started this podcast, Ken, what if Keith and Chow had ignored me when I was 14 years old?
Yeah.
What if they'd just been like, yeah, we don't want to game with this 14-year-old kid? That would have been a totally reasonable thing for them to say. But the fact that they didn't is what got me into the hobby. So there's a part of me that feels like I need to pay that forward with as many people as I can. But you can't, because if you pay it forward with everyone, you run the risk of damaging what you've built with the club. And I find it a very hard line to walk. I really do. Like I'm genuinely conflicted about the way that we approach it and how we handle it.
Yeah, because with the profile, it could bring a lot of people in. So do you have where you are you in a large catchment area? Are you in a suburb or are you in a town? What sort of catchment area do you have?
Miles, I'll let you handle that.
Well, we're in York, Pennsylvania. We don't like to say exactly where because we don't want someone knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, let me in." Or we're afraid
It's
of someone peering in the
Ken from
window.
Yorkshire.
Yeah,
Let me in.
It is a
so
town.
it's by invitation only. And if I invite someone to the club and they don't work out, it's my responsibility to tell them. And that in itself kind of, I self-edit. There's some people I think would be great. Our most recent member, Dale, played in some of my Historicon games. He's been a fabulous addition to the club. Others, we're very careful, and I know that I don't want that to sound elitist, but we have a really good thing going, and the worst thing we can do is screw it up.
Oh, exactly. Do you have like an initiation ceremony like the Freemasons?
Legally, we're not allowed to discuss that, Ken.
I was just, if you dress up as a chicken and have to walk blindfold through Walmart or whatever, easy.
We're not furries like those bolt action players. Okay, we have different standards.
Excellent. One thing I do have to mention is that you have a nice selection of whiskey.
Yes,
in the
we
whole.
do.
We do. So
Uh,
just completely off topic? What's your kind of go-to whiskies then, Greg?
Number one choice would be Dalmore 15-year. That's going to be that's going to absolutely be. It's a really good Scotch, really kind of middle of the road, smooth Scotch. My number one American whiskey is a rye whiskey, High West Rendezvous Rye. It's out of Utah, small batch distiller. Just the best rye whiskey I've ever had. But yeah, we've got a really well-stocked bar at the club.
Excellent.
Very well stocked.
I'm a Glenfiddich 25.
Oh, bit of class there.
25.
Bit of smooth. Ooh.
What about you?
I did see some Lafroig in there.
Oh yes,
which is my favourite.
That's strong, very strong.
Very, very strong. And do you guys do whiskey with an E, Irish whiskey.
Yeah, we have Jameson in the club.
Mm, mm. Can I I shall recommend. What shall I recommend Irish wise? Connemara. That's very good. It's like a light version of Lafroig,
All right.
PT,
Oh,
but not
Let's
but
try
not
that.
as Lafroig is a very much like we have a thing called Marmite in the UK, which is like a vegetable based spread that you either love it or you absolutely hate it. And
I thought
Lafroig,
Marmite is what green mushy peas turns into after 2 days.
after about 25 years, it turns into
Okay,
Marmite.
that's what I thought. I thought there was a link. I got a great idea, Ken. Why don't you come to the club, and if you bring any of those whiskeys, you'll be in.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Green Spot. That's the other Irish whiskey, and you can definitely get that in America because Daryl Hall from Hall and Oates. That's his favourite whiskey.
we will add it to the list.
Green Spot. Very, very good. Very, very good. Right, we've drifted off as we always tend to do on this show. There into
Oh
something
no, that's very
non-war
much
game
on
related.
topic for us. That is very much on brand.
When are we going to get you over to the States?
Well, I'm due to retire hopefully next year. So once I've done that, I'm going to get on my bike and go around and visit places. So I haven't been to the States. Me and my wife went over there 25 years ago. We did Boston, New York, and then we went up to Montreal and Quebec, obviously in Canada. So yeah, we're due a visit. So I'll try and tie it in with Historicon or something along those lines for sure.
We would love to host you for a game,
Oh, that would be awesome. That would be
or
awesome.
just go sailing on the Chesapeake if you prefer. Either one.
Yeah. As long as you're not chucking tea off the boat.
Well, we do a little. It's just a bag. It's just one bag. It's
No
ceremonial.
promises.
You can look away, but we have to do it.
I'll tell you what they make. I've said it. I've said Lancashire a number of times on this show, but they make Lancashire tea, which it's not good in Yorkshire. So I'll bring some Lancashire tea, and you can ceremonially throw that off the boat.
Fair
Perfect.
enough.
Perfect.
That's the spirit of compromise, right there.
So just for the viewers out there and the listeners, is it always like that at Little Wars Club, Little Wars TV? So when the cameras aren't on, are there like beer bottles everywhere, bits of half-eaten pizza on the table, or are you always that tidy?
I'm gonna let Greg answer this one first. 'Cause I'm setting a trap.
Actually, I think the club is pretty tidy.
Is it?
We do try to clean up at the end of every Monday because we're only there once a week, so we can't be
Yeah.
leaving food and drink just out for an entire week. But we definitely do clean up a little bit extra before we let the cameras on.
Yeah, it,
Excellent.
it does. And we're blessed that our most important club member, Ed, always takes the garbage out and will look
Good
askance at
lad.
us if it's not ready to go out. And no one ever wants to disappoint Ed because he is the nicest human being in the world.
Brilliant. Big shout out to Ed then if he's the one who takes the
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
out.
Keith once said, "We don't deserve Ed as a club member," and it's true. We
Yeah.
don't deserve him.
Yeah, at Leeds War Games Club, we own our own premises as well, and we generally have one club night a week, and then others will open the club up at other times for longer games, or get a key off a committee member and have something else. Are you similar there, or is it available to club members all the time, or do you just have that one fixed evening a week?
Monday night is game night, but I would
Mm.
say that most of the original guys who were in the club, so there's probably at least 10 guys who have keys to the building.
Yeah.
And guys do get, we have often Josh will run a board game night on Thursday. I know Tony does some Dungeons and Dragons and role playing stuff on maybe one Saturday a month. So
Mm.
there are other events that
Yeah.
do happen at the club, but it's mostly just the Monday night gaming.
Yeah, there's not a lot of crafting that goes on in there, and we've got a pretty firm rule that you can't use the club as your personal storage device
Yes,
because it would
that's
get
very important.
overwhelmed very quickly.
Yeah. I've told the story a number of times on here, but it was a club member of ours who passed away, who left us the money that enabled us to buy where we are now. And his collection of figures fills a large quantity of the hall. And I've just gone through the sad process of one of my friends passing away about a year ago, and him leaving me everything. And it's a huge amount of stuff. It's a great honour
Yeah.
to have people's figures, but there's us wargamers, we don't do things by halves. Uh, so to think about storing all 10 wargamer stuff at a premises, it very soon would fill up.
Ken, question on your club.
Mm.
How does maintenance, how does like the ongoing cost of the club, do you guys have dues? I mean, how much do you have to pay to be a member of your club? And how many like paying members are there?
So we have a yearly fee, which is, I don't want to give exact figures on air, but we have a yearly fee. It's not that expensive. And there are other ways you can pay weekly, or you can pay monthly, or by direct debit, or whatever. And that goes into a pot. And then there's still a large quantity of money left from the estate of the chap that we had. And then on top of that, we run a war game show called Fiasco in Leeds every year, and any profits from that go towards running the club. So it's it bounces along quite nicely and has done for years. So it's pretty decent, and regularly since we've had the new premises and we can leave games up and stuff, 25 to 30 on a week. Some weeks you'll only
Wow.
get 10 or 5 or 6, but then a good week is 20, 25. So yeah, very very popular. And we've branched out, and we do a lot of like hosting of tournaments on a weekend for other clubs, and for there's like the National Society of Ancient Wargaming. They have a competition that goes around the country, so they come to us. We had the main guy from BattleTech come, put a big display on, and loads of people joined in that, and there was like some stuff released at that as well. So it's quite big. The I'm not involved in the running of it anymore, but the guys who do really put the effort in, and the income from those weekend events as well brings in money. Not that we particularly
That's
need it.
very impressive.
Yeah, it's a really good setup. It's a really good setup, and it really annoys me that I tend to be working and not able to go to the club most weeks. The week that I do get it, I get a call from work and I have to go in. So,
One
but there
more
we go. That's
year.
right.
One
One
more
more year.
year.
One more year.
I don't know, Ken.
Um,
I've retired 3 times. It just doesn't stick.
I'm retiring once.
All right. We'll see about that.
Yeah, well, I might do some figure painting for just to keep the money coming in, because I used to be many years ago. I used to be a commission painter, but that's a way of earning a little bit of money for the future, I think. So talking of future, then, can you say anything about big reveal opening
Which,
the door?
oh, behind the door.
Behind the door. What's behind the door?
I will tell you what's behind the door. But before I do, I want to know what you think is behind the door.
I think it's a swimming pool and sauna for the older members of the club. No, I
Hey,
think I no, it could be a ginormous selection of whiskies.
could be a whiskey pool.
Oh wow, now we're talking. Yeah, but you'd have to mix them, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And
It'd sting
I
if
don't
you had
like
cut. Yeah. No,
I
that's
don't like blended whiskey. It's wrong. So I think you've gone for a big table in one room.
Okay. So we acquired the office next to our office. So
Mm.
we are effectively doubling the size of the club. And the office that we took over was just a plain white walled office. We had to do a little light demo. And it's been a year and a half that we've been renovating it. We did not mention it on the channel. We've been kind of keeping it quiet as we've been working on it, and we're actually hoping to finish it in about a week or two. So we're like right
Oh,
at the
good.
finish line. We're just putting in like the paintings on the wall and stuff. But we decided to model it after a Crusader castle. So
Oh,
when we open the door,
nice.
you're gonna get to see our take on a Crusader castle.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be
And
awesome.
it will, of course, have gaming tables. I think we're going to have 3 6x4 gaming tables in there.
Hmm. So your tables, do they move around? Can you make bigger tables if you want from the ones that you've got?
Yes.
Oh, superb. That's what we like to see. That's what we like to see.
I think he's waiting for an idiot who looks like me to finish one more table that goes in the old space so that we can move the other ones out. I believe I'm the long pole in the tent here.
Miles is making us a new table, which is very generous.
Excellent. That's what we like to see. You guys had kind of a hiatus from the channel. Are you back now? What's the gap? Why was there a gap, and what's coming in the future?
There was a gap because I do all the video editing, and
Mm.
last November, my wife and I had our first child. So
Congratulations.
obviously, thank you. I had plenty of notice that was coming. So we knew
Mm.
I knew there was going to be a pretty significant pause
Yeah.
in channel production. So we did not film any videos from September of last year all the way to like April of this year, which is the longest gap we have had in channel production since we started on
Yeah.
YouTube 6 years ago. We've always just been like constantly making videos, which, if I'm being honest, was kind of another nice reason to take a break. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
six years of making 50 to 60 videos a year is a lot, and not what we ever like initially thought was going to happen. It just kind of
Mm.
happened, and so it was really nice to just put everything aside. You know, I got to focus on family. Other guys in the club got to not worry about me harassing them for writing a script or building any terrain or painting a new army. I think everybody appreciated having a little bit of time away.
Mm.
I
And did
think
the
so
club
too.
carry on?
But
Oh yes,
I think
oh
we're
yes,
also kind of excited to kind of resume.
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, when absence makes the heart grow fonder, and when you take a long break from doing something that you love, yeah, you do come back re-energized and maybe with a little bit of a new perspective on how you might want
Yeah.
to tackle it moving forward. So I think
Mm.
we have some new ideas here, but yeah, I'm excited, and we're filming games actively right now. And our next big war game that's coming out on YouTube will be the Battle of Octium, with 1,200 Langton ships. We got Adrian Goldsworthy as our guest, amazing historian. He's gave us a phenomenal interview talking about Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So yeah, exciting to be back.
I think it does make a difference. I had a 6 week break after last Christmas last year, because I just got burnt out,
Sure.
and I think that made a massive difference to me and reinvigorated me, and I started coming up with new ideas for shows and stuff and people to
Yeah.
talk to. So I can see how it would make a difference for
I,
for,
I,
for you guys.
I think also, while the vast majority of people we interact with are positive, you do get a handful of people who are overwhelmingly negative.
Yes.
And if you're not careful, you can actually focus on them and focus on them too much. And being away, you ignore them and realize they're just irrelevant people. They're not worth the time of day.
Yeah, you've been doing this a long time, Ken. I mean, how long has your podcast been around? I feel like you've been doing this for years.
It's 3.5 years now.
Yeah, I mean
And
that's a lot.
the blog's been going for 12 years. I don't do a lot on the blog anymore, but so yeah, it is a long time, and I do tend to kind of savor the episodes and only do really one, maximum two a month, but enjoy the ones that I do. And every time I come to do one, I'm enthusiastic about doing it. Um,
I think we're the same way. I don't think we're ever going back to 50, 60 videos a year. We're not
mm,
doing weekly videos. It's just it's too much work, and Greg does all that work, so that's just not. It's an
mm.
unfair distribution on him.
So, Greg, do you use editing in work? Or is it just a hobby?
No, 100% a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm self-taught on video editing. I find it very enjoyable and a very creative process, but it's its own hobby, right? Like in the same way that I think 3D printing is kind of its
Yes.
own hobby, video editing is its own hobby. And yes, I'm using it in conjunction for wargaming, but there's a lot to learn, a lot to do. It takes a lot of time, but I find it very rewarding. Other guys in the club have tried it. Miles has tried it, and most people just don't seem to find it that enjoyable. but I do.
Or they suck at it like I do.
That old one. We have people like that at work who say, "Oh, I'm not very good at making tea." It's like, right, come on, then. Let me take you
Are,
into the
are they good at
kitchen, and
drinking
we're
it?
gonna have. Oh yes, very good at drinking it. In fact, I think my entire department would stop working without tea. We had a new lady start with a couple of
I'm just
about
thinking of how much more productive you'd be if we just got them hooked on coffee.
no, you see, coffee sends me crazy. If I have an
That's the point.
espresso, I have to run around the block for 15 minutes to slow my heart down to get the caffeine out of the system.
See, but the capitalist me, that's just like untapped worker productivity. We just got to find a way to tap it.
Yeah, in my line of work, you don't want productivity. Trust me. Trust me.
Fair enough.
So, do you have a costume budget?
Oh my gosh, so funny. The costume thing really started as a total gag, as a joke, but then it took on a life of its own. And yes, we spend money intentionally to buy costumes and hats at this point because it is just way too much fun to not do it.
But there's a dark secret.
Mm.
That budget is not equitably distributed. Some of us get to spend $50 on their Napoleon outfit as opposed to someone else spending something else on their Alexander outfit. I'm not naming names.
Is it like I know in the States you have black budgets, don't you, in the government
Yep.
for like
Yes, yes.
UFO investigations? Is that what the costume budget is in Little Wars to TV? Is it kind of a black budget? It's underneath sundries or something like that in your accounts.
Yeah, it's something like that. No, most of our costumes honestly come from like I forget, it's like halloweenstore.com. I mean they're super
It's whatever
cheap.
Amazon can get us the next day because we really don't plan ahead that well.
They're very very cheap, but it's fun, right? I mean, if you're going to
Yeah,
play the Battle of Octium, you want to be wearing a toy Roman helmet, we're
you've got
men
to.
playing with toy soldiers. You got to have fun with this.
Hmm. Yeah. Have you ever done any of the costumes in an outside at a battlefield? I don't know whether I can't remember whether you have
Yes.
or not.
Yes, we have.
Ah, right.
Yeah, in our Gettysburg episode, actually, Steve was in like professionally. He rented a uniform from a local like reenacting shop, so he was head to
Mm,
toe in a full uniform on location at Gettysburg. He got a lot of looks.
awesome.
Yeah, that was fun.
He was a Confederate general, which as he was there, he realized, I don't know if I want to be seen in this.
Too late.
Did you get Did he get 20 people following him? And then after he'd finished talking, they all gave him $10.
I don't know that
That's
he
a
got
different
any
type of
tips.
uniform we wear for that.
Oh, okay. Let's not mention that. So um, we'll draw to a close now because I know I've gone over the time for yourself, Greg. But just before, rather than ask you what future videos you got coming up, I'm going to ask you what future costumes might we see?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'm trying to think right now. You're probably going to see a medieval costume in relation
Okay.
to our Crusades room, so I don't think I'm giving too much away by saying
No,
that.
no, no.
And you might, at some point, it probably is going to be next year. You might see a fantasy costume.
Ooh. Ooh.
Yes.
You
Miles, are
could,
you wearing any of these costumes?
yes, but only on our OnlyFans channel.
We're
You
going to
might
pay for that
see
content.
you might see a Marshall Victor costume.
Oh, very good. Very good. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Um, at the end of the show, it's a tradition that I ask my guests if they have a question for me. I know, Greg, you've asked a few as we've gone along, but have either of you chaps got a question that you'd like me to take before we finish?
What's your big project? Are you doing Pavia with Martin? And
So, God, don't talk to me about Pavia. Oh my God.
he thinks you
Um,
are.
yeah, we're supposed to be doing. I don't know whether you've seen it. If you haven't, go on, bob onto the internet. But at the Royal Armouries in Leeds, we have a ginormous life-size Pavia exhibition that's got 10, 12 people on it, all life-size, all in original armor. We've got pikemen, we've got gendarmes and everything, and there's a huge space in front of it. And we're supposed to be putting Pavia on there next year for the anniversary. But the Royal Armouries, we're not getting anywhere in terms of firming updates and what have you. So I'm smashing my head against the wall a little bit with Pavia at the moment.
Gotcha.
But that I don't need to do anything for that because I've got thousands of them. So my big projects at the moment are Narvik. Currently building all the ships for Narvik in 1/700 scale. For debut in Salute 25. No, 26. God, dear me, got a couple of year off then. And then I've just started some 28mm Napoleonics, would you believe?
Oh my goodness,
Ooh.
I did not expect that from you.
No, I've got a massive 7,000 15mm Napoleonics, but I'm struggling now to paint small scales to the detail that I want. I can
Mm.
still paint them, but I'm just not happy with how they look. So I've gone for I'm doing an old school elite miniatures kind of Peter Gilder look for the 28mm Napoleonics. So that's my next major project.
I do have a question for you, Ken.
Mm.
This is a question that I have asked some other fellow content creators because I think content creators have a little bit of a different perspective on answering this question. Uh,
Oh.
and I'd like you to first give me your just immediate gut reaction, and then we can maybe talk through it a little bit. I would like to know how many historical wargamers you think there are in the world. How big is the hobby? How many people?
That's a good question. I'm going to say worldwide.
Worldwide. And let me preface it again by saying active. And by active, I mean, people who at least partake in some part of the hobby a couple times a year. A game, painting figures. They're not just observers of the hobby. They are somehow engaged in the hobby.
I'm going to go 60,000.
60,000. That is one of the lowest answers I have
Yeah,
ever
very
heard.
low.
Is it?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So now that you've given me your gut reaction, I'm curious, where did that come from?
I was thinking about how many people listen to this podcast. No, I was thinking like our biggest show, the UK, we get 5,000.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think the UK, and I don't know whether it's skewed based on my listing figures because most people, UK, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
Same on our YouTube channel. It's all the English speaking countries.
But then after that, there's a big drop off, and whether it's a language issue or whatever, I'm not really sure. So it's very hard to get a grasp of the figures in non-English speaking countries. I know there's a Facebook channel, Facebook page, Wargaming Brazil. They do some wonderful stuff, but I don't know how. There's 15 there, 20, 100. You don't know. I'm speaking to a guy from an Italian Wargames club very soon, so it'll be interesting to get his perspective as well. So I might be on the low side, but have you got an actual figure?
No, there is no actual figure, and I mean,
Mm.
I don't think there's any way to even really get any accurate estimate, which is why I just like asking. I mean, I like asking content
Yeah.
creators kind of what they think it could be. I have no idea. And Miles and I have talked about this question before, and it's interesting to hear people's thought process.
Yeah, we
Interesting that you mentioned looking at Salute, right? Like I have thought about the exact same thing in light of Historicon. So Historicon is the biggest show in America, and it gets about 2,000 people. That's nothing. I mean, that is less than nothing. Which would lead you to think that, man, the hobby is maybe smaller than we think on a global basis.
Yeah, my best guess is there's probably 300,000, and we there's a market research firm that we use at work, and I asked them to look at it, and they guesstimated revenue for historical gaming at 300 million, and then
Wow.
which is, it seems like a lot, but it's not. And the average wargamer, based on the WSS survey, spends about $1,000 a year, and so that kind of works out to about 300,000 participants. But no one knows. It's actually too small to really measure accurately. The fantasy market is in the billions, and it's maybe a 10-to-1 ratio. But it's still, I think it's healthier than it's ever been. I think it's just different.
Yeah, I mean the World Cup of Wargames manufacturers, 151 companies were nominated, and there's more than were actually nominated, but that's quite a reasonable amount, 151 companies. And then, I mean, from those, we don't know how many are taking a full-time wage from it, how many are just doing it full time. But clearly, there's enough money sloshing around in the hobby to keep these companies going. And then, of course, there's the lads and lasses who just buy figures and collect them and paint them and don't interact with anyone else. There's quite a few of those out there. So how would it would be very difficult to ever count those. It's an interesting question, Greg. It really is.
Well, ask around. Feel free to ask other guys that who are in the space, because I've asked a number of creators, and I always find it to be kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah. What sort of range of answers have you had then, if you found the lowest? It's showing you Yorkshire optimism there, aren't I?
Yeah, no, actually, interesting that we have this collection of people here, because you are the lowest guess I've ever heard. And I've never heard anyone guess more than Miles. So he is the upper bound of what I have heard. And, I get a lot of people who are like 100,000, because I think that's just an easy number to say. But yeah, I would probably be guessing some number smaller than Miles, but I'm probably closer to him than I am to you. I would definitely be somewhere 200,000 or more, which again is not a lot of people, right? Like globally, as an audience, it's a very small hobby.
Yeah. And it's a very tough market to operate in, because it's small and the cost of entry is, zero. So, if you want to be brave, start a miniature company. It requires an immense amount of courage.
So I think the experiment that should be done from this then is that everyone who does historical wargaming should subscribe to Little Wars TV and Yorkshire Gamer, and then we'll know how many people do historical gaming.
What a perfect way to end this podcast.
And we will be rich beyond our dreams.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you. You've made a lifelong goal of mine possible today. And that goal is, I've now completed the triple crown of UK wargaming. I've been to Salute.
Yes.
I've been to the Joy of Six in glamorous Sheffield.
Oh, very glamorous.
And now I've been on your podcast. That's it. That's the trifecta.
That's very kind of you. Actually, I forgot to ask. You did the Caesars Awards. Are they coming? I'm interested because I'm currently the reigning champion of the podcast. So if it's not coming back, I don't mind, because I can say that I am still the Little Wars TV's best podcast.
You will be the reigning champion for the foreseeable future. We have no immediate plans to bring back.
And we expect you to rub that into Alex's nose as much as possible.
Constantly. I in the last podcast I was mentioning getting an extra mortgage to fit an extension on my house to get all the podcast awards in.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent investment.
I'm sure he loved that. Yes.
Right, it's been brilliant, guys. So if you don't mind saying good night to the listeners.
Good night
Good
to the
night with you.
listeners. And Ken, thank you very much for reaching out to schedule this. I've listened to your podcast for several years now, and it's fun to be on and to chat with you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, sir.
There we go. Another episode is over, and it was a short one, 2 hours. Um, don't get used to it. I'm not going to keep them short. This was just I'm sure me, Greg, and Miles could have gone on for hours and hours and hours if we had the time. And that's what I enjoyed. I really enjoyed my chat with the guys from Little Wars TV. And as I said earlier on, I'm a big fan of what they do and how they promote the hobby. And it's great to have contact with them. And hopefully, I will get over to the States in the next few years and share a glass of whiskey with them, with or without an E. And I'm looking forward to that. Now, my next episode I have already recorded. This morning I popped over to a little place called Honley near Holmfirth in Yorkshire. And those of you who know, that's last of the summer wine country. And I sat down and I spoke to Trevor Dixon from Dixon Miniatures, and I went along to his workshop, and we spent an hour or so chatting away about all things Dixon's miniatures. I don't like to put episodes out too close together, so I'm going to keep hold of that for a couple of weeks, give me time to edit it, etc. And you never know, WSS might interview him in the meantime. Enough said. Until next time, see you later. Sithee.